In this part, we are going to teach you how to work with Motion 2 script. Why? Because Motion 2 script can help us make smooth and complicated animations. There are some animations that can be made by Motion 2 script more easily instead of making them manually. Now make a new composition. If you have already installed this script, you can find it here in Window tab. Okay, now I make a circle here. If you want to have the anchor point of the shapes in the middle of them, when making them, you have to go Preferences setting. So go to Edit tab, click on Preferences and select General and check Center Anchor Point in New Shape Layer. Here we have a circle that needs to be smaller. Now we want to animate it. Let's have 3 copies of it. Do it with Ctrl D. Select all of the 4 circles and press P on your keyboard to uncheck their positions to be able to make keyframe. Activate the chronometer next to them and after 50 frames, drag each of the circles to the right side of the scene. Let's reorder the layers. This is the first. This is the second. This is the third and this is the last one. The first move is a linear move. Take the keyframes a bit forward to see this better. When you go to Graph View, you see the animation is shown like this. Let me uncheck Show Expression Editor. Linear means just in a moment the shape would speed up from 0 to 500 pixels and suddenly becomes 0 again. The second move is like Missile's move that the shape speeds up gradually from slow to fast. When Missile option is clicked on and its value is 0, keyframes will have a status called Bezier Continuous that we'll talk about it more afterwards. If you assign the value of 0 for the second option, keyframes will become linear, which is default status of the software. The third option is anchor. When you assign the value of 0 for it, as you see the keyframes become square-like that we call it toggle hole. In this status, there will not be interpolation between 2 keyframes and the object will move to the new position only in a single frame. This helps you very much in stop motion style. For example, when you want an event to occur every 20 frames, you can get use of this option. But if you assign another values for it, the 2 keyframes become sandglass like that. We call it easy ease. As much as you increase the value assigned for it, the compression of the points in the beginning of the move would increase. When the value becomes 100, the utmost compression will be for the beginning of the move and the minimum of the compression would be at the end of the move. It means we will have a very slow start and a very quick ending. The second option is called Easy Ease, which divides the compression equally between the 2 keyframes and the maximum speed would be in the middle of them. The last option is anchor, in which the maximum compression is for the end of the move. That means the closer the object gets to the end, the slower its move will become. As you see in all options, objects start moving in a single frame and stop it in another frame. but the kind of movement is different because their speed in each frame is different. The first circle has a linear move, the second one has an easy out move, the third one has an easy ease move, and the last one has an easy in move. By script motion we can have multiple changes, and even after animating the objects we can move their anchor points. If you move an object's anchor point manually with pan behind anchor point tool, especially after animating it, this makes a new keyframe. Of course, you can also move anchor points by changing their values. In the manual way of moving an anchor point, the value of it and the value of its position would change. That makes a keyframe. In the second way, by changing the value of an anchor point, we will not make a keyframe, but the position of the layer will change. We have also another way of moving the position of an anchor point by pan behind anchor point tool without making a new keyframe. As we said, this tool can change both of position's value and anchor point. In order to make it affect only on the anchor point, by pressing Alt on your keyboard, move the anchor point. But the special function of Motion 2 script is that it would not change the animation and does not move the layer. Since even by moving an anchor point while holding Alt, you need to adjust the position of the layer. Another special function of the script is that you can change the anchor points of several layers at the same time without changing the animation. Motion 2 script has also some other functions that are really useful. The first one is excite order. Let's make a new composition and name it as excite. For example, we have a circle and we want to put it exactly in the center of the scene. To do so, you can right-click on it and click on Transform to select Center in View. You can use guide options to know if the object is located exactly in the center of the scene. Now let's animate it. On frame 50, insert a keyframe and insert another keyframe at the first frame. Take the object out of the scene. We have such an animation. Normally, the object that enters the scene must have an easy ease status, and the maximum compression of the frames should be inside the scene. It means we will have a slow to fast move or anchor status. Here I use a value of 75. Since this value is a standard value, Excite can make a springy move for the object at the last frame. This option calculates the speed and velocity of the objects and accordingly makes a springy move. When the move has an easy in status, the velocity of the final move is 0 and you can check it in Graph Editor. When the velocity of the final move is 0, Excite cannot work. So you must make this keyframe linear, either by holding Ctrl and clicking on the keyframe, or by using the script and giving a value of 0 to easy ease. Now we want to use Excite for it. So select Position and click on Excite. Notice that Excite is applied to the parameter, not to the keyframe. So you must first select the parameter and then apply Excite to it. The shorter the distance between the keyframes is, the faster will be the velocity. It intensifies the springy move. Excite gives to the layer 3 slider effects that we talked about it in the elementary course. As you see, it automatically names these layers and writes codes for the operation, as you can see in the expression of the position. To change this springy status, you don't need to change the coding. You can simply control this by changing these effects. You can see the outcome of the coding in Graph Editor and Composition panel by Activate Show Post Expression Graph option. Well, as you see, it's hard to have an accurate look at it. Let's fit the graphs to view. This is our animation. From here onwards, you can see the impact of the coding. To have a better look on it, you can select Edit Value Graph. Zoom it more. You can see the number of bounces. The more you decrease the value of bounce, the shorter the bounce will be. These bounces are relative. It means their amount depends on the velocity of the object. Overshoot is an option that helps you adjust the span of move, and by changing it, the span of move will increase or decrease. Friction is an option that determines the strength of increasing movement in time. All of these values are relative, and the value of the velocity of the object directly affects it. The next option is Blend. Let's make a new composition and name it as Blend. Here, make a square and insert a position keyframe for it. And after 60 frames, move the square to the right side. By this handless, make the move spiral. The function of blend is to smooth the vertical and horizontal movement of the shape. If you manually increase its smoothness value, the square will no longer keep moving on the line that we have already defined for it. In a way that it can even change the movement to a direct move. This parameter can adjust the accuracy of the movement. If you zero out it, the square will move exactly on the defined line. At the end, we have a checkbox that makes you able to activate or inactivate the impact of this option. If you want to remove all the impacts that the script has created, you can simply click on this bin icon. Unless you need to remove the expression first, then remove the effects. But by selecting position and clicking on this icon, you remove them in a second. It really helps you, especially when you have many parameters, that manually removing all of the impacts is really time-consuming. The next option is burst. When you use this option, such an effect is created. This option is used in such motions. Look at this thermometer. These tiny circles that come out of the thermometer are made by burst. These lines are also made by this tool. We usually create these details by burst tool. Of course, some of them, not all of them. Let me show another example. You see, these shapes have also been created by burst tool. These tiny shapes that radiate from the question and exclamation marks can make the animation more interesting. Okay, let's continue. You can define its position in the scene, its number, its radiation angle, and you can also adjust its offset type. By this option, you can adjust distance from center. By this one, you can link width to height. By this, you can turn the shapes into circles. And if you reduce their roundness value, they turn into squares. You can also define it what color they are shown, or activate or inactivate stroke and fill and so on. Of course, nowadays you do not have to make these effects by yourself, since there are many pre-made beautiful packages in the internet that you can use to add burst to your objects. I have a collection of them here. For example, these are energy effects. This one is fire package. This is smoke, and these are spark effects. The most professional one is superset, that is combination of different effects. These are some of the examples that are mixed with these footages. This is another collection, and this part contains the previews of all of the footages in the package. This package contains transition, and you can use them to make such animations that you can see. That's why I said you don't need to make burst effects by yourself. The next option is clone. Let's go back to the first composition. Here we have 4 layers, and all of them have their own keyframes. Normally, if you want to copy a group of keyframes from one layer, you can simply select copy and paste them wherever you want. But if you want to copy a group of keyframes from different layers, is there such a possibility? As you see, the layers are copied instead of the keyframes. By using clone option, you can easily copy the keyframes and paste them wherever your indicator is. The next option is jump. First, I make a new composition and name it jump. Make a circle. Insert a position keyframe and take it a bit forward, and on the first frame drag it up, and at last click on jump option. You see the difference between jump and excite option. The springy movement of excite status is towards inside and outside, but the movement in jump order is just to a single direction. In the settings of this option we have gravity. The more its value is, you will have shorter and faster bounces. For example, in our animation, the circle 4 hits the ground for 4 times and has a normal height and speed. But if you change this value to 16, you will have shorter and faster bounces. By this option, you can determine how many times it must jump. And stretch option defines the decrease or increase in power of jumping. Now, to see the outcome, activate this option. Go to the graph window, zoom it, increase the value of stretch up to 100. As you see, not only the height of the jump after each bounce does not decrease, but also it increases the height. It's because its value is more than 100. If you set its value from 60 to 99, you will see such bounces, and when you set it to 100, the height in all of the jumps is the same. By changing the value of maximum jumps, you would change the number of jumps. If you increase gravity, as you see in graph window, you will have shorter jumps. The next option is Name. Let's go back to Comp 1. If you want to manually name the layers, you must do it one by one. For example, by pressing Enter on it, you name a layer 01. But if you want to name a group of layers collectively, you can use this option. Here write a name like 01, and here you can order which mark can separate between the name and numbers, then click on Rename. As you see, the script automatically named and numbered all of the layers. For example, you can name them as Circle. You can determine which mark must be between names and numbers. You can also determine the separator to be before or after the names by checking these two checkboxes. The next option is Null. Normally, to parent objects to a null object, you must make a new null object that is located in the center of the scene, and you must relocate it afterward. Then you can parent the objects to the null object. But it is easier to select the object and click on null icon. This not only creates a null and parent the shapes to it, but also it locates the null object in the middle of the select shapes. Another point to mention about parenting is that when you parent objects to a null object and move their parent, objects with their motion paths would change. In this example, the ball's movement has been inverted and now we must locate them in the left side of the scene. The next option is Orbit. Make a circle in the center of the scene. Color it green and consider it to be the globe. Make another circle next to it. Color it gray and consider it to be the moon. Make the moon smaller and click on Orbit option. Through Effect Control panel, define the globe to be the orbit's target. Now you can see the moon moves around the globe. After doing so, you cannot manually move this layer anymore. but you can do it through Effect Control panel. For example, you can adjust the distance of the moon to the globe by orbit distance. Here, you can speed up or slow down the orbital movement. Let's make it closer to the main layer. If you wanted to have a complete movement around the globe every second, go to second 1. Increase the speed to the amount that it moves around the globe every second. Here, the value is 10. Now every second it has a complete movement around the globe. Making this effect manually is not that much easy in After Effects. To understand it better, apply gradient fill to the moon. You see the moon layer does not have any rotation around itself in its rotational movement. Let me sharpen the gradient and change the black color to gray. If we have rotated the moon around the globe by parenting, we didn't have such a condition. Let me show it to you. Duplicate the layer and delete its effects and expressions. Relocate the new layer. Make a null and put it in the center of the globe layer. Parent it to the null. Now, by rotating the null object, you can see the rotation of new layer is also taking impact from it. But in orbit option, we don't see this. Now it's time to talk about rope. I want to show you a sample of it. As you see, each circle is linked to another by rope. This automatic link is made by this option. In this sample, the animator has only animated the circles, and these ropes automatically follow the circles. Now give it a try. Make a circle in the scene. Set a color for it. Duplicate it to have some other circles scattered in the scene. Now we want to make ropes that connect the circles to each other. Note that you can only connect 2 layers to each other by rope option. So select 2 of circles and click on rope icon. As you see, this option makes a rope between the 2 layers and put it in a separate layer. It means you can simply hide or change it or adjust it by the effects that you have in Access. For instance, you can adjust the starting or ending thickness of the rope. If we select 3 layers and click on the rope icon, the first 2 layers will be linked to each other by a rope. So we should connect the circles to each other 2 by 2. Now let's animate it. In order to have the layers enter the scene in sequence, press Alt and open bracket to determine the beginning of the layers, and after 5 frames press Alt and close bracket to define the end of the layers. Now select the layers in sequence. Right-click on them and from Keyframe Assistant, click on Sequence Layers. OK. To make it more beautiful, you can use Excite option too. Rope option has other settings too. For example, you can adjust its starting and ending point, and since we have linked every rope to every 2 layers, now we cannot change these values. Note that the ropes are linked to the anchor point of every 2 layers. So, if you wanted to link a rope to the bottom of a layer, you should have moved its anchor point to its bottom. By this option, you can adjust the length of the ropes. By this one, you offset the rope along path. This one is for defining the amount of softness of the ropes. You can set outer or inner color for each rope by this. And by these 2 last options, you can define to which layers the ropes are linked. In this part, we're gonna talk about warp. This option has interesting functions. Make a new composition and name it warp. Note that this option works only on shape layers and does not work on solid layers. Make a circle. Make a position keyframe and 30 frames further. Take the circle to the right side and make another keyframe. Select the keyframes and give them an easy ease effect. Now click on warp icon. This gives the shape a kind of liquid movement. You can adjust this effect through Effect Controls panel. The first option is warp time, that is the same as echo effect through Effects and Presets panel. The second one is edge smooth, that makes the effect smooth, thin or thick. The third one can also adjust thinness and thickness of the effect. To make it more interesting, reduce the easy ease value and set it to 80. Duplicate the layer and delete the effects of the layer. Now we have a ball with a long tail. In order to mix these 2 layers more, make an adjustment layer. And blur it by Fastbox Blur and set its value to 15. Now give it a matte choker effect. Adjust its values to have such an outcome. To have a better outcome, thin the tail and shorten it by warp effect. Duplicate the layer. We shouldn't change its position since we have already animated it. so move it by its anchor point. Make it thinner. Drag the first layer up and adjust its length and thickness as you see. In order to give it more details, duplicate the upper tail. Set its echo time to 0.07 and its number of echoes to 1. By Edge Smooth effect, make it thinner. To have a more exciting movement, first change the color of the main layer's label and go to the end of the animation and remove the keyframes and finally parent them to the main layer. Find the motion sketch panel and insert the ideal keyframes for it. We need to speed up the animation, so select the layer. Press U, select the keyframes, and by holding Alt compress them. Now let's see the outcome. That's fine. It really takes a longer time if you want to do all this manually and frame by frame. The next option is a spin. Make a new composition and name it spin. Make a circle and apply gradient fill to the shape to see its rotational movement. Now, click on the spin icon. To manage this effect, you can use Effect Controls panel. For instance, you can adjust its rotation direction. And by this, you can activate or inactivate its rotation. And finally, the last option is a stair. To work with it, make a star in your composition. Duplicate the star and arrange them in the scene. Set their anchor points to be on their top. Make a circle on the upper side of the scene. Now let's animate it. Now select the stars and click on Stare option. Then order the stars to stare at the circle. Now you can see they stare at the circle wherever it goes.